So welcome to part 2 of this wonderful, hopefully wonderful for you as well, dialogue that I'm having with Jaya Kumar. So in this segment, what we're going to be talking about is a little more specific and specific to interesting aspect of Jaya's life of being a technology entrepreneur in the late 1990s and having successfully exited that venture. And I have an interesting anecdote that follows from there, which is because I met him after he had successfully exited that venture. So this segment, we're going to be focusing on entrepreneurship, the trials, the tribulations, the ups, the downs, the joys, the sorrows, and the process. And a very interesting aspect of that journey is that Jaya's wife, Siddha, absolutely accomplished person in her own right, and one of the key members, very early members of a very well-known and a path-breaking organization, IT organization in India. And I'll let Jaya talk about that as well. And how did they manage to marry, pun intended, all of this, into their life. So, Jaya. When I met you, I didn't realize that you had already successfully exited a venture, right? And I want to start with the anecdote that you told me, right? And this was when we were in Detroit, and we had about 2.5, 3 months together there, and we didn't have pretty much anything else to do but the pleasure or the displeasure of each other's company. And one day you let slip that you had very successfully exited a technology venture in the Valley in 2000, and we met in 2002. And when I was speaking about this, you said that you had come back after that venture and that you would wake up in the morning, read the newspaper, have your chai and go to sleep. And then wake up and have lunch and read something and go to sleep. Wake up in the evening, have your chai and again go to sleep. And dinner and you'd go to sleep. So I looked at you and I said, so Jaya, how long did you do this? You looked at me and you smiled and I said, 3 months. I said, how can somebody do this for 3 months? And then you also told me something very interesting, that one day when you woke up in the morning, had your chai, and you were going back to go to sleep, your dad stopped you and took you to the window and pointed to a commercial shopping complex across the road and told you that shop, I'm taking that on rent. I'm going to get a photocopying machine and I'm going to put it there. And you asked him why again. And he said, I don't care if you have enough money for 7 generations. You have 2 young children at home. I don't want your young children seeing their father do nothing but sleep and eat. So every morning at 9 o'clock, you'll go sit there and you'll do photocopying. Come back at 6 o'clock, right? Yeah. Very interesting at multiple levels, that this anecdote. So my question is, what first, before we come back to this interesting thing, it says a lot about your dad. It says a lot about your guiding principles as well. In 1997, when entrepreneurship was not even thought about, right? What made you choose the path of entrepreneurship, and that too in technology?
So GS, you actually focus on a very interesting time, both from a career perspective for me, as well as the context that prevailed in India at that time. And it was maybe a few years after liberalization. And going off on your own was considered very risky. Even though I went to these engineering and management schools, everybody would talk about placement season. Nobody talks about entrepreneurial season like they do today. Today you have entrepreneurial centers. Also, where did you get placed? Citibank. When I graduated out of IIT, I think I got a job in Kosal, what used to be called Kosal at that time. Again, a software firm in Mumbai, which I didn't take. Of course, I came to Bangalore and joined IIN. So the entire environment at that time was, how can you get placed in a good paying job? And so the focus from the education system was also to make you competent and qualified to execute in different roles. And at home, even our parents also would focus on us, ask, hey, did you get a good job? Nobody said, hey, are you going off on your own? Why are you doing something so risky? So it's when I first got this opportunity, courtesy people I had worked with before. I used to work in Wipro. When the opportunity came my way, I used to work in Oracle. Now it is very interesting. When I joined Oracle and I went to the Bay Area for the first time working in Oracle, I've been to the Bay Area through Wipro as well. I noticed how Oracle ran its technology management systems. And I often used to wonder why these did not happen in Wipro at that time. They came in. Eventually, all this came in. But the Wipro leadership was very familiar with that context. And some of the finest technology leaders at that time, and even considered legends today, the CEO of Wipro, who you all very well know, now leads another firm in the city, the technology officer of Wipro, chief technology officer, who also leads another startup. Actually, he's more a mentor in that startup and mentor in many startups. I'm refraining from taking their name, but it...
And they also had set aside stock for you to join them.
Yes, when they...
In that startup.
The other firm, yes. Well, I'm surprised you remember that. That's true. Which I didn't join, strangely, at that time. So these people were very familiar with the context, and I would wonder how come those systems were not implemented in Wipro at that time, and they were perfectly valid reasons, because the technology firms at that time were evolving. So one of our joint friends, who was my colleague in that startup, probably I think my name cropped up in their discussions, and they put this proposal across. Why don't you consider working with us? We are trying to get this startup started in the Bay Area. And I was already familiar with the Bay Area because we would go for months on end and stay in the US working in Oracle and Redwood Shores. And I was really one of the very, very early employees of Oracle in India. And so helped sort of get the entire stuff going. Oracle is one of the largest companies in India today, which maybe not in the league of services companies like IBM, but as a product company. So when they said that, it was both a little bit of apprehension as well as an opportunity. And the opportunity was, hey, I would get to implement all these systems which seem to be not implementable in bureaucratic organization that I'm working in, which was my worldview at that time. Later on, obviously, I was wiser to learn that there were apparently good reasons why it took time for those systems to get implemented in India. And they were basic systems, the version control system. If you have coding standards, that means when people wrote code, they code to a particular set of rules, and why uniformity was required. The philosophy behind the design of the operating systems like Unix, those books and those knowledge were already available, and I used to read as much as other folks perhaps read. And those principles were then encoded in policies and systems and processes, which technology management systems use in the US to scale to having thousands of people work on a single code base. And there were no code bases of that size firstly in India, so perhaps that requirement was just coming into existence. And the use of those technology management systems was not even, was just the email systems were coming in. I'm not kidding you at that time. This was email systems had just about come, and there were delivery of, I don't know if I'm getting too technical here, but delivery of support elements that were required to keep machines working through email was considered a big deal. Today, your phones, when you turn on, they automatically download the next OS and upgrade. This self-maintenance, self-healing were all concepts far in the distant future, another decade and a half ahead. So when this opportunity came to, hey, work in the Bay Area, that in itself was, hey, I'll be working in this context where I will get exposed and maybe help drive implementation from ground up, which will obviously expand my horizon. So it's a great opportunity. On the other side, when I told my family, they said, "Are you nuts? What are you doing? I mean, if Oracle is offering you a job, it makes good sense. It's a large established company, which is the same paradigm that they had for India, transferred into the US context. You're going there to start a company of 4 people, 5 people. Do you even know what you're doing?" And then, of course, how will your family manage? Because my wife also worked, and I don't know whether this was way ahead of its time, but every decision we took jointly. So I had to make a presentation to what I would refer to as my home minister, that, hey, this is the proposition, and does this therefore pass the muster of the home council? And so, very interestingly, my wife obviously understood what it was, and she said that maybe I think you should go, because this is completely away from what is the norm at that time. And then I said, "Hey, you have 2 small kids. How are you going to manage?" She said, "We'll figure it out." And to me, I find that today most people at that same stage tend to get very hassled, and in fact, there would be very fractious discussions on how we will unless this is taken care of. I have seen many cases of this today. There have also seen cases of people who are saying, "Hey, this is a great, similar worldview." But at that time, it was a little revolutionary, if you would think. And I think my in-laws were not really very pleased with me, saying, "You are leaving your wife and 2 kids and your wife will manage home and office, and the 2 kids all by yourself. And while you go buzzing off to the US to this adventure." So I had to explain to them, it doesn't look like it's an adventure. Definitely a learning opportunity, but no clue what awaits. My dad thought I was nuts, to be very short. But I was also an individual who did not do things conventional. Most of the times I took the road less traveled. And I say that because after IIT, I had an opportunity to go to the US. I did not take it. I came to Bangalore. I had an opportunity to join conventional companies, like everybody else did, go for placement, Citibank, in tech, not in banking. But I did not join the big firms. I instead chose to stay in Bangalore because I like the city. And I chose to work in the company that started in Wipro. So I did things unconventionally. So I thought, hey, this looks different, and let's take a start. And of course, the people I knew were, of course, people who were very comfortable with, and leaders from a very well-known organization in India at that time, very well-respected. And one of those leaders was the CEO of the company. So those were the positives. And one of the interesting things that Siddha said was, in her role, sometimes she would travel to the US as well. So we would figure out a way to be in touch on a regular basis, which was considered unthinkable at that time. And so I decided to take the plunge. I went to the Bay Area, and we started ab initio, from starting with getting a social security number. And luckily, the fact was that my other colleague, whom our mutual acquaintance and Ram had already been there, was familiar with the context. I had also been there, but I didn't live there because when you go in an American corporation, they take care of everything. You don't have to really worry. When you go through an Indian company, then you have to be far more aware of the context because you have to do something for yourself. So there was a difference in the contextual awareness, and there was a complete difference in the technology awareness, because my understanding of the technology was from the American context, whereas there it was flipped. And we did all that. We had a certain amount of funding, and we did everything, by the way. We swept the office to going to IKEA and buying furniture and putting the furniture up together. We went to Comp USA to buy computers. We brought it back, assembled them, put them on the table. We set up the office from ground up. We got 4 walls, essentially. And in a startup, you have to do everything from coding to making presentations, to carrying out the trash, to figuring out how to make the money run. and worry about where will the next amount of money come from. And so we had a good VC, actually a very famous VC, whom Sanjay used to call Billu Seth. His name was Bill Gates. Bill Draper. Who's I don't know if you're familiar with Hotmail, of course. So Tim Draper, his son, funded Hotmail, and Bill Draper was extremely famous. Which, by the way, again, I had no clue, and I'm not sure whether Sanjay had as much clue at that time. He, of course, knew a little more than I did. But when we went to his office, Bill had these pictures on his wall with every single political leader in the world, from Fidel Castro to the then president of the US, to shaking hands with him. So it was definitely like, oh, the gentleman is very well connected. That is his office in San Francisco on Market Street, where on the 14th floor, and he had this nice office overlooking the bay. But it was his idea to get a bunch of tech entrepreneurs or tech experts from India, and then see what would come out of it. Again, an experiment that he tried. And the CTO, very interestingly, turned out to be my senior from college. He was a gold medalist of his batch, computer science, and he was at Stanford. One of the early pioneers in data mining. He wrote some of the seminal papers in data mining. He was what you would call a data mining expert at that time. And so we had a lot of discussions, and we, starting from an absolutely blank state, where the CTO, he had some ideas, and then we came up with what is called a personalization engine. And the time we started, there were only 2 companies in the world which did that. One was us, we used data mining, and one was Net Perceptions, which later I think got acquired by Amazon. And they used a technology called collaborative filtering. And we were the only 2 guys in the world. And we got the opportunity to take some technology decisions, which in retrospect turns out to be very far-sighted. We went in for Java when Java was unstable. Java had just come in around 1995, 94, 95, and this was 97, and it was just going through its various releases and gaining acceptance, and Sun was pushing very hard for Java to be accepted as a language. But we decided to go with Java because we were a small team. And so these decisions that we took proved to be really far-sighted in the long run, because Java, there's some technology elements involved. Java, for example, allowed us portability. If you wrote in C, you had to do a lot of memory management on your own. Java handled the memory for you. It had its own drawbacks, because then the algorithms which manage memory for Java, you were subject to the vagaries of those algorithms. However, we were not at the scale at which those algorithms would impact us immediately. So we then recruited a small team. At the height, we must have been 7, 8, maybe 10 people, or maybe 11 people. And so, and we built the product. And at that time, we've been to Seattle, and Amazon, the behemoth that you see today with Jeff Bezos, was in a small warehouse. And like you see my house with books, there were all sorts of stuff piled up, and we were presenting what we had built to people who were in the e-commerce side, the leadership, the VPs of Amazon at that time, and project managers. And it was a small company, and Amazon just launched in 96, right? And we were pitching in 98 to Amazon. We had even contacted Tim Kugel of Yahoo. We presented to some really interesting people, and in the course of the discussions, we came across some really legends that you would call in the internet space. So today, there is a famous VC firm called Anderson and Horowitz. So Mark Anderson, who invented the browser, who wrote the browser, at that time used to be Netscape. So Mark Anderson and Tim House. Tim House was the inventor of LDAP. LDAP is Lightweight Directory Access Protocol to access my web. These 2 guys came to our office, and as part of Netscape's review of us, and they went through the code. They put me up against a wall and quizzed me, because I was running engineering. That Guru obviously was the chief technology officer. He was a guru in data mining, I was the guy who ran engineering and who helped build the product and craft all this stuff. So these two guys put us up against the wall, and they obviously had a detailed talk with CTO, but they were very convinced of his credentials because he was from IBM Algorithm Research. And they put me up against the wall and asked me about the whole code, and they went through it. And then they did actually put an offer on the table. The history of why that did not materialize is a completely different, perhaps in a different conversation. But 2-3 things came to light, at least for me personally. One, that startups are a pressure cooker atmosphere. And if you are, especially at that time in the Bay Area, where big monies were involved, and you must remember what $1 million is today after the advent of Bitcoin, which is loose change. $1 million in 2000 and 2001 was a completely different story.
Absolutely.
2024. And so there were big monies involved at that time. So a house in San Francisco, for which you have to pay $6,000 a month rent today, used to cost about $600,000 in San Francisco City and in areas which are not gentrified. So they did put an offer on the table. So you can see that for us that was a vindication of the fact that we were on the right track. In fact, when I was in Mexico, one of the leaders of HP were there in some other context, and he was asking, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, we do the personalization." "Oh, so you help all these commerce guys on the internet to con us into buying things?" I said, No, we actually don't do the e-commerce. And he smiles and he says, "Oh, you just give them the guns. That's it, right?" Which is true. We were doing the personalization. We would find out what people bought, find out abstract patterns from it, and then see what other things they would buy. So upsell, cross-sell, those kinds of activities were facilitated by the personalization engine. So it was really a huge vindication for us when Netscape put an offer on the table for the engineering team and for the CTO and for all of us, that the fact that we were on the right track and the fact that they found value in what we were doing. The deal did not happen for various other reasons. But what happened was, I think people sort of, their aspirations suddenly started rising. And so all your human characteristics, your flaws and your strengths get amplified in a pressure cooker atmosphere. And you have to maintain a very steady head because you can have the highest of accomplishments and you're very close to getting it. And then you can have the steepest of falls because miscalculation by a member of the team could really throw it to the dog. Anything can happen. So there you have to be emotionally resilient because you are thinking that, hey, he's going down a great track one day. And then as it nears, you have the famous saying, there's many a slip between the cup and the lip. And then it doesn't happen. And then it goes down some other track. So this is your story. When you join a startup and you are then struggling through maintaining funding, or keeping the money running. And cash is king, by the way, in a startup. If you don't have cash, as when COVID started, our Prime Minister Modi says, "Jaan hai to jaan hai." So if you are around to fight the next battle, then there is some hope. If you are not around, then you are history. So you have to be there to play the game, to bring the next thing to market or to get your idea to life. And so we did also struggle we ran out of money for some time and we had to manage. And you can imagine for somebody who's never lived in the US to be in that situation and you are living in a house. And so you do all sorts of optimization to make sure that you are there to fight the next battle, which we did eventually. And then going through those cycles up and down. So we met really interesting folks who would look at us and who would say that if you sell it to us, you can't sell it to anybody else. So the whole business model then goes out of the window, right? If you think you're having a product and you're selling it to different people, and each person you show it to says, "Hey, this is brilliant, we want it," and you can't sell it to anybody else, then you don't have a business. He's essentially saying, sell your company to us, sell your product to us, and then you work for us. And that was not the original intent of the leadership and the group of folks who got together, the founders and co-founders who got together, saying, "Hey, we want to run a company for some time, grow the market, sell the product, grow the company, and then see how much value we can bring to the table. And that completely got thrown out of the window. And in many meetings, in fact, we met many interesting groups during during the time that we had a developed product. And of course, it was at that time, it was a modest product, I would say. And internet e-commerce had not reached the billions of clicks that websites have nowadays, but it certainly had a lot. And for me, it was quite a lot of learning because I hadn't done data mining at that time. So I was learning data mining ab initio. And the CTO was a great guy. He actually took the trouble to walk us through the math. And following the math was not really too difficult. So many times we would go into meetings thinking that, okay, we have a product and here is somebody, Internet Shopping Network was one very famous Barry dealer, his company we presented to. And again, we ran into the same again and again. So then we had to figure out how to pivot. So today, these are common concepts. Hey, you start with a particular product. You have a minimum viable product that you take to market. You find that the product market fit is not there. Then you have to pivot the product and find or pivot the direction of your company. And then figure out where is your market and then get to a product market fit as quickly as possible. These are very common buzzwords today. Minimum viable product, product market fit, pivoting. These words did not even exist at that time. But we were doing that, figuring out how the hell do we make this work? Because everybody was clear, hey, we love what you're doing, we want it. But if you give it to us, you cannot give it to anybody else. And this is a very tough problem we came up with at that time. So that was on the on the company front. Macroeconomically, I don't know how many people know or follow the trends of how things changed during the 70s when the US went off the gold standard of Bretton Woods in 1971. And then there was the oil price shock when the OPEC countries raised the cost of oil. And all these things went up and down. And eventually unrelated events caused the macroeconomic crash of the internet bust. So when the internet bust, what is called the internet bust started, internet valuation started to tumble. And at that time, there were a few search engine companies around. I don't know, most people would not have heard about them also. They are Alta Vista, Lycos, Infoseek. Everybody only now knows Google. But Google was a late entrant into the market. There were very strong Yahoo, Alta Vista, Lycos, Infoseek were all strong search engines.
Excite.
Yes, Excite. And Google came and wiped the floor with them. That's a different story. But Google had just started and were coming into their own. So Infoseek was seeking to get into the e-commerce market. And I think they then decided to acquire us. Infoseek themselves then got into trouble because Google was coming into the market in a really big way. And Google's approach was different and these guys' approaches were different. And the whole thing was, the initial point of divergence was in ads. Google used text ads, whereas if you remember Yahoo and all at that time, they used to use these, graphic ads. And then they used to do a lot of analysis on these ads and the impact it had and retention, relevance and all that. And Google came in with these text ads and it gave this Gmail free and something else free, and it would position the text ads and they started being able to do targeted ad this in much more intelligent fashion because of the context awareness. So Infoseek then got acquired by Disney because Disney was seeking to, and Disney realized that they needed to get into the online media space. And they decided to acquire Infoseek, which I wanted to get into e-commerce. And so we ended up getting acquired by Disney and ended up working with Disney for a year post the acquisition. So 2, 3, 4 things One, that you may get hit by circumstances over which you have no control. And had we chose to continue with the company, it would have been a complete wipeout. I have a really good friend. There was a product manager of Chinese origin, married to an Indian who used to work with me at that time, one of my colleagues. And they lost their shirt because they invested similarly, like you have the internet boom today in AI. So after that, subsequently, there were wave after wave of different technologies, and only some succeed and the others go bust. And so a lot of my people lost a lot of money at that time. We were lucky to get out just before it went off the cliff. And so we got acquired, and we could have made a lot more money because I talked about an opportunity that came our way, but there were other opportunities. So you have to have the right judgment. And my learning from that entire experience was a startup is a pressure cooker atmosphere. Both your strengths and weaknesses of individuals' characters get amplified. And if you do not have the emotional quotient, not just the IQ, you not only need the EQ, and you perhaps need a spiritual quotient. In fact, the centering of yourself, not to get swayed by higher numbers or a basis of going off the cliff. You have to stay the course. If you cannot stay the course, either can kill you. Both are equally dangerous. Sometimes you think, getting a lot of money is good. It's not good, because a lot of people went off the cliff after they were supposedly successful. In fact, one of the famous CTOs who became a CTO after an acquisition of his startup got arrested because he ended up doing all sorts of non-PG-13 things that he was not, would not have done had he been a regular individual. The success went to his head. So both are equally dangerous. And so if you have a vision and if you have a goal, you must be able to stick with it, regardless of whether you're doing extremely well or or under extreme pressure. You have to have that equanimity. And that was my learning from the whole experience. So later on, the whole startup is a big thing. People think it's a bed of roses. It's not. It's a learning environment. And if you are happy learning, and if you are happy using it as a way to become more resilient, more anti-fragile, to use today's terminology, this terminology did not exist at that time, then a startup is for you. If, however, you balk at odds which are against you, or you feel that it's, you just have to do a startup and then you are in a unicorn, and then everybody's talking about $1 billion valuations, then a startup is actually not for you. You have to have a certain amount of centering to be successful. You have to stay the course. And the course can be both up and down and up and down. And now, parallelly, I had to manage the fact that my wife, was in Bangalore, and I was in the Bay Area, trying to make this thing work. And my wife, of course, used to travel. About once a quarter, she used to come to the Bay Area, and we would meet and spend some time. And then for the first year, I never came back to India because we were focused on building the product. Much later, when I was coming, I called my wife and I wanted to eat a vada. I had never eaten a vada for 1.5 years, and I had this craving for vada. So I called my wife and said, please make vada. The day I land, I want to be eating only vadas. I don't want to eat I want to eat vadas. I'm not sure why I got that fixation in my mind. So she asked, why don't you just go down to that, what is called Gandhinagar, which is Sunnyvale, where all the Indian establishments are, and I have a vada there. I said, well, those vadas or those foods at that time are Americanized. They are made to suit the American taste because they're obviously catering to a larger American population. And Indians would come by and they would take a bite. But, and she had a big laugh at my expense. Of course, to be fair to her, she did make the vadas when I landed back, and I had I don't know how many, maybe at least 18 or 20 vadas that day when I landed back in India.
That's a normal day for me.
But for me, that was at that time pretty a big, the medu vadas. Not just palpu vada, the medu vadas, the dal, not the dal vadas or madur vadas. But of course, I went on to have those later on. The other thing that I learned is Indian food tastes absolutely divine in India. And most people don't recognize it because those who have gone abroad and eaten Indian food abroad will realize what a dumbed down version of Indian food you get and what a impoverished palate is present in terms of spices and tastes and flavors in other parts of the world relative to India. That was something I grew to appreciate India far more by living in the US. And I have to tell you, I've eaten in every hotel from San Francisco to San Jose for those 4 years because I was there by myself. Breakfast, lunch, dinner used to be outside. Rarely would I cook. I mean, for some time, I had a roommate, a member of the team who used to cook. But he would again cook the really basic stuff. If he wanted to have a meal, we would go out and have a meal.
I remember Kichu telling me that when Vishal and he visited,
yes,
you insisted, Vishal insisted that you would make sambar, rasam,
yes,
and...
they made a fantastic meal and left. And we ate that for 3 days because we didn't want to finish it all. So, because otherwise, you would go out and you would get the regular fare, which is what you're familiar with. All the really regular brands. If you wanted to have a great meal, you go to a restaurant, you get the same thing, but a more polished version of it, with somebody in a nice uniform coming in, serving you in a plate. But if you want really good Indian food, oh man, you really have to struggle. And so then you realize the richness of Indian food and the flavors and all the rest of the stuff. That was a segue. But when I came back after the experience, so we never wanted to settle in the US. My wife also studied in Carnegie Mellon and she was doing a PhD there. She could have settled there also if she wanted. Maybe I could have continued there. We had no desire to live in the US. So I came back and then I was really not particularly keen on finding a job because it did not enthuse me to go back to the same environment. So I was sleeping at home, trying to get the motivation to figure out what I should do next. That was when my dad, again, an interesting sign of those times. And it is from his era, and perhaps maybe, and even an earlier era, that if you're sitting at home doing nothing, then there is some problem with you. I would say, hey, who cares? Yeah, okay, so there's some problem with me. But my dad says that it's not good. One, obviously, because the kids take their cues from the parents and how they conduct themselves. And the other, that the neighbors would wonder, and there would be gossip, and there would be unnecessary interaction. And we used to live in a flat, in the sense that there were many other flats, and it was a community. And you had to be cognizant of what the community did. So I think my dad was trying to draw attention to the fact that if you just lie down in the house doing nothing, it is still not acceptable. I mean, if you're married into the Ambani family, then it's okay to be a ghar jamai. But here, it's not as if I was a ghar jamai, I was in a ghar nothing. I mean, I hang around, not as if we were in a very khandani rais, as you say, family, born into family, wealth family. So if you're doing nothing, okay, so his role is family, ghar jamai. Yeah. Even that was not true. So my dad's feeling was, you have to do something. And even if it is a very modest thing or not very jazzy, a regular thing, it is okay. At best, they will say, oh, yeah, he does something very very boring. But yeah, he does something. And people are satisfied from morning 9. If you didn't have that structure, it started raising questions. It is very interesting because I did not look at it that way because I was coming back all from the US, Bay Area startup. You'll hang around for a few years, you figure out meaning in life, and then you'll do something. That was not an acceptable thing then. Today, perhaps it's okay. I mean, a lot of people work in startups and then they want to take a break between jobs. That's not an accepted part of the idiom today. It was not an accepted part of the idiom at that time. And so then I went on to join the company where we later connected.
Where you ran into me.
Yes.
Until then, life was good.
Yeah, I have to say that indeed it was good. Before that company started, it was another small group with 5-6 people. And then I got into this whole thing of serial entrepreneurship. So my wife started a company and I was part of that. Then I got involved with some other startups, and it continues to this day, different kinds of startups. So the 2-3 things that I learned is, unless you are a consistent learner, you want to learn new fields, new technologies, new ways of looking at things, new industries. If you have to be a lifelong learner, you should not get into entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is not a 9-to-5 job. It is a all-consuming learning environment. And if you really want to be a founder, if you want to be, this is just being associated with startup. If you want to found a company, if you want to, you really have to have passion, because there are heights of accomplishment and appreciation, and there are depths of despair and perhaps watching your entire effort go down the tubes. And unless you have the maturity, not just the emotional maturity, and I would add that spiritual quotient or spiritual maturity to be able to deal with it, it can have potentially a very strong impact.
Yeah. So, to be an entrepreneur, understand that it is a high pressure cooker situation. Your strengths and your weaknesses will get magnified and brought out to the open. Need to be centered, not just in terms of intelligence, but in terms of emotions and in terms of spiritual centering. So spiritual does not necessarily mean religious, but some kind of connection where we are looking at it differently, not just
spirit
of the spirit,
not just the emotions.
And that we must be willing to handle the unknown. It cannot always be that, you have clarity in terms of what's going to happen. Like you said, and I'm reading probably between the lines that probably the first offer was much better than what you finally got. Maybe, right? That's what I'm reading, right? And therefore, again, coming back to the Indic roots, that, this is what you're supposed to be getting. Have the equanimity to say that this is what it was. I remember one very interesting anecdote that you shared with me through this process, that Bill Draper, you were supposed to meet him. And as always, you got there earlier. And you were pacing up and down in the office or the ground on the pavement, because you wanted it to be the time and then you could walk into the office. And he called you in ahead of time, right? Because he saw you, that you were pacing up and down. And one of the most important things, and I want you to elaborate on this, when I meet with startup entrepreneurs, founders, I tell them the most important thing is that be ahead of time. I was late today coming in for this recording, but that's different, right? As a startup entrepreneur, need to be ahead of time, never late to any meeting, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. So I'd like you to expand on that anecdote one, and I'd like you to expand on a couple of, apart from the Vada example, how did Siddha and you manage, and how did Shreyas and Priyanka and the extended family, how did they support you? How did they manage? And what kept them going? What kept you going? The anecdote with Bill Draper in terms of being ahead of time, and then an anecdote in terms of how, on the family level, how did you manage?
So the view in the Bay Area is very different, or was very different from the view in India. In India, there's an element of charta hai. Mm-hmm. So if you obviously have to be on time for meetings and all. You are a few minutes late. Today, it's actually even worse. People walk in half an hour late to meetings and to trainings and to workshops that you conduct, and absolutely blasé about it. Such people, at least should not be in startups. They may well be in trainings, may work in a regular job. But in the US, if somebody gives you time, it is considered disrespectful if you arrive late, because somebody has set aside that time for you. So I know even our team, the co-founders, if a VC firm set a certain time, we would really be sweating buckets of water if there was a traffic on the road, because we wanted to make it by that time, even if we started early. I mean, we could say, hey, we started well before time, and the road traffic conditions made us even a few minutes late. But we would try to we use the maps to figure out different routes to see if we could jump, cut across, take shortcuts, and land up at the time that we committed. It was that intense. So there were two other principles that I learned, is that whenever you are faced with a decision, you sleep over it for 24 hours. Because when a decision is presented to you, the context may generate pressures on you. You may have certain emotions. It's always best to sleep over the thing for 24 hours till some things settle down a little bit. You have slept over it, your subconscious has thought about it. And then you see if you feel the same way. You may not. Or you may think of some different approaches to the same decision than what you would have been presented in meetings. That was one. And second was the fact that, hey, you need to be on time. And so this thing started getting drilled. Whereas in India, it was okay. Bangalore at that time was a far more serene place than it is today. You didn't, as you said, you be 2 hours on the road and cover 2 kilometers. At that time, you could actually arrive in reasonable time, or be a couple of minutes late. It was considered you were pardoned. I mean, you could occasionally get a glare from the person who conducted the meeting. So it was not very clear whether there were some crucial decisions that I wanted to figure out for myself. And we were very critical to closing this deal. And unfortunately, my wife's sister had a tragedy at that time. And I was seriously trying to figure out whether I needed to continue in the US or be back here, because there was a lot of pressure for my wife to manage. And we had a certain protocol. In fact, my phone bills at that time used to be north of $1,500 a month. Wow. Because I would spend at least 40 minutes to an hour talking to my wife almost every alternate day. We would just be talking on the phone about things, keeping each other up to date about what was going on. And sometimes my kids would talk to me on the phone. So my daughter, who you see as a grown-up person today, she used to read these nursery rhymes on the phone to me. And so I would talk to her, and whenever she came, she would get a bunch of books. And Harry Potter was one of the books she picked up around 1999, 2000, from a bookshop in Fremont, and brought back. And Harry Potter was at that time not so well known. Much later on, of course, now it's a completely different story. So reading over the phone, and that was how we sort of kept in touch and talking for a long time. And I considered that money well spent. 1,500 baht telephone bill with AT&T made AT&T call me up regularly to make sure I was a good humor. They would do whatever it takes. In fact, they offered to put another phone for free in the houses because my phone bills were so high. And they knew I called India. They will think about good rates. But it was not the kind of rates that we have today. They were expensive. And you had to cough up a lot of money. But I think that was money well spent at that time. So you sort of maintain the family connection with voice as much as possible, because at that time video calling and all was not part of the deal. So you do the best you can, and then you travel back and forth. So you have to spend that time in the family, because your core strength comes from the family to be able to execute in the startup. It's not the other way around. And sometimes people invert it. You think, oh, your passion, you're a technologist. No. Your actual strength comes from the fact that you have a family and you have to work with the family. And you have to keep those communication flows alive and tap into it for strength to manage all these situations. And so there was this unfortunate tragedy in the family at that time. And my wife was really struggling to keep manage the whole show, so to say, because there were 3 sisters, and to be there for my in-laws at that time and for her sister at that time, and then manage these 2 kids who had to go to office, and then she had a full-time job which had its own pressures. and she was managing a function, and we used to report to the senior most leadership in that company, which is a very well-known company, as you mentioned, at that time, and meet their expectations. There were too many balls juggling in there. And so I was seriously considering, hey, I need to come back, and I'm just not able to make. So that was the time when Bill had called me to his office in San Francisco, and I arrived almost 30 minutes early, and I was walking up and down the pavement, and I think he spotted me from there. And so after about 15 minutes, I went up, and when I went up and I told his secretary that I have a meeting in 15 minutes, he said, no, why don't you go away? He knows that you're here. He said, I said, he knows I'm here? He said, no, he knows you were downstairs because he saw you. And so I walked in, and so I was explaining to him what happened. And maybe that's a conversation, what happened with the conversation another day. But Bill said that, hey, would you consider, because you are in a technology firm, the technologists are key elements of the company. Of course, there is the product and there is the CEO who leads the company and all that. But in order to maintain the direction in which you're going, you need the technologists. And so he was very keen, that I should say. And so that was when they sort of, this whole thing of leveling up, it happened a couple of times before, and then this time too. And then he said that we would like you to continue. Is very important for us. For us, he included us in this stuff, that you not take the decision to go back to India this time. So, and I explained to him what the situation was. Then I told Bill, hey, you know what, Bill, I don't want to say yes or no. I will sleep over and I'll come back in 24 hours. So I went back, and I did not say yes or no to him at that time. And this is a decision, or there is a practice that I have maintained from then on, all through life, that whenever I'm faced with a decision and there are strong emotions and the context and it looks a certain way, I will look at the decision and then I will say I will sleep over. And for 24 hours, I will not chase it or obsessively think about it, but I just mull over it, and then I'll go to sleep. And then next morning I will wake up and I'll see if I feel the same way about things, or has new ways of looking at the situation opened up, and then go back and take a call, whatever the call is. I took the call to stay back and continue on with it.
Not only sleep over it for 24 hours, but also switch off your phone and all modes of communication.
And of course, I talk it over with my wife. Make sure that she...
Because that is something I learned from you.
Yes.
That when there is something important to be decided upon, actually it is useful to cut off all sources of communication. Could be good, could be bad. But whatever it is, you're there with your thoughts. I'm there with my thoughts. I'm there with only the people that I want to speak to.
Yes. And guess who I found doing the same thing later on? Vishwanathan Anand.
Wow.
Before a match, he will not even leave the eye of another person. He will be very focused. He will not talk to anybody. And before he goes into any of those championship 5-round, 10-round matches, he will just come down, he will sit at the table, and he will only engage with the opponent. He will not even engage in eye contact with other people. He will not read the newspaper, he will not read the press. He is completely focused on what he is doing. Because it's so all-encompassing that you need to have collected yourself. Typically, our self is very fragmented. Part of it is engaged in this conversation. Part of it is worrying about something that has to be done. That fragmented self has to be centered, brought together to face a situation which might require all of it to be present, is a phrase that you use. To actually exercise that activity of being present, you have to collect the fragmented self and engage with the context. And that was something that I learned on by living through those experiences. And then I got an affirmation when Vishwanathan Anand shared, I forget whether it was in a talk or, I think it was in a talk, and maybe it's still there on YouTube, where he says, hey, before an important match, before a match in which I have to go through 10 rounds or 7 rounds and with a challenger, or I am the challenger, I will really work with my seconds over a few months, and then a few days before that, I completely will not communicate with or take any external inputs. And when I come to the venue, even his manager is his wife. So when he comes to the venue, may just focus on the match, finish the match, and go off. At best, he would, if they wanted him to talk to the press, he might do that. But that's it. He will not even look at somebody. He will just go straight to the table, stay focused, engage with the opponent. Maybe he exchanges glances with the opponent. Maybe that's part of a strategy, of course, to read how the opponent is playing in a particular situation. Other than that, nothing. And so that collecting yourself, a self which is normally so scattered, is very important to important part of being centered when you're facing difficult circumstances.
Today, like you said, 1997, entrepreneurship was not something that people looked at very favorably. They would say, are you crazy? Chucking up a job with Oracle, right? And then doing something. But today, like you rightly said, there are schools that have entrepreneurship programs. I'm privileged, fortunate to be able to go and conduct some programs in schools for youngsters in the age group of, let's say, 12 and 13 to 17. So there are people who are looking at entrepreneurship at that age. I had very pleasantly, I was surprised to find an 11-year-old in one of the programs that I was part of, the group that was conducting a program for entrepreneurship. And the kind of spirit that they have, because they're seeing this entrepreneurship everywhere now. Yeah, it is, the stories are. So 1997, it was very different. Today, it's very different. Any academic institution, specifically technology or business, if they don't have an entrepreneurship program, entrepreneurship cell, then the institution itself doesn't seem to have a certain amount of importance. So that background I'm giving, what would and you are still connected with the entrepreneurship world today. You're not an executive entrepreneur, but you are an entrepreneur even today. What inputs, advice, thoughts would you have for young entrepreneurs today, young and old entrepreneurs? When I say young, I'm talking about not their chronological age, but their youngness in the entrepreneurship journey. What inputs would you have for people who are embarking on their entrepreneurship journey? One, I definitely also want your inputs for people who have been on the entrepreneurship journey and they are at, let's say, a crossroads, right? It's like the Ajit joke, right? Liquid oxygen. Oxygen will not allow you to die. Liquid will not allow you to live. So many people are caught in a place where they are not progressing, but they are not also dying. So it's not that some people are waiting for that decision to be forced on them. How would you, so first part, what inputs, advice would you have for people who are starting or just started their entrepreneurship journey today, in today's world? And second part, I'd like you to share your thoughts on what would you suggest to people who are, let's say, caught between the devil and the deep blue sea in their entrepreneurship journey.
So, two very important groups, I think, for today. So, people who are youngsters who want to become entrepreneurs should have in their minds that it's going to be a lifelong learning journey. Very often, there is a kid that I help study nowadays, and he's a youngster, class 7, class 8. Even he thinks about entrepreneurship. He wants to start a company when he grows up or when he's able to do so. Now,
interesting interjection here, intentional. What do you teach this child?
Math, robotics, science, some element of science, programming.
So you're a serial entrepreneur, you're an advisor, and you're also a tutor.
Yes.
Lovely.
Working with children. So it's very strange. I come from a community of teachers. Like you come from a community which taught the Vedas also. So we are a community. So I find, and this is a strange thing about India, it has so much of depth that there is something called community knowledge. And so I find that I'm able to teach. My dad could also teach very well. And my dad was not a very learned man, he was in the forces. But I found that he could get across to kids. And then when I got to the stage where I thought, hey, I like kids, number one. And I tried to teach kids, I could get across to them also. And it was not something that somebody's taught me. I didn't go and do a formal B.Ed. So there is something to our Indic civilization, the whole Jati Varna system, which gives people capacities which have unfortunately been suppressed or set aside by the English language education that everybody now goes through or chases after, the Western copy. So very interestingly, this kid always wants to play Roblox. Roblox is I don't know if you are familiar with it. It's sort of a building game, and there are, you kill some people in it if they come to disturb you. And then his mother wanted me to get him off just Roblox and do other things. So then you start thinking, right, what can you engage a kid in? And so I got a robotics kit, and very quickly he went up to the most complex thing you could build with that. It had motors, and you could build really complex stuff, and he could do it. Then I was trying to teach him programming and with Python. And Python is a very easily learnable language. And if you're familiar with the JWST, the space telescope, the NASA puts out on its website, there's an API, and it puts out the best pictures that various telescopes take. So I wanted to get this kid to write a code which will then get that picture and then send it to your phone. Mm-hmm. Sending it to a phone, of course, requires a connection to a mobile system. So he learned how to do a lot of things by watching YouTube videos, by showing me the code that he had written, and by compiling. And he could understand something. Of course, he doesn't understand system architecture and all those big terminologies that are associated with building a system. But he recognizes that by coding, you can do many things that you otherwise cannot. And he is sort of progressing like this, math and different aspects. I also taught him, or it's hard to teach how to do the Rubik's Cube, for example. And so then doing the Rubik's Cube really fast. And sort of the person also changes, right, when they start doing it. And now he himself wants to do these things. And so when you trigger that learning element, then you are a great candidate for being an entrepreneur. Because you will go into a field, you will learn new stuff, and you will see it with eyes that conventional eyes are not seeing, and there is an opportunity there for something new to emerge. If that something new emerges and it meets or solves a market problem or is a breakthrough step forward, then you can build a company with it and you can have a viable business. And you need not necessarily become a unicorn, but you could have a nice business and maybe it gets acquired by somebody. It might have various ways of evolution in it. Right? So, but you have to have that. And people can trigger that. And I think when you go to your entrepreneur school, one of the, I would say the negative parts of the school, if you look at kids, the moment they go to a classroom, they all go to sleep. And they will be sitting at the back and on their phones, working on their phones. So how do you trigger this desire to learn new things, to do new things, to explore new areas in youngsters and in entrepreneurs is of the age group that you're addressing, I think actually needs to be addressed earlier. By the time you get to them when they're running a course, they are already programmed into this classroom thing which teaches them nothing. You have to teach them to be autodidacts, self-taught. Not what their fellow teaches them in school or in a course and they learn in, let's say, 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours of a semester. And they feel that they know the subject. They neither know the subject, nor have they picked up the thing to, hey, I've just been exposed to it, and I've been exposed to some concepts. If I enjoy it, I will learn myself. And they will drive it. So interestingly, with this kid, for example, after I interacted with him and he picked up many of these things, he got 4 of his friends together and he started building something on Roblox, new characters. And he figured out that there is some concept on Roblox, like in Age of Empires. You could build a set of characters and put it, and other people could take those characters and he'll make money out of it. That is really instilling entrepreneurial spirit in a kid. That is, you first trigger the enjoyment of learning. Hey, I did something. So when he completes the Rubik's Cube, you should see the smile on his face. I can do it. And it comes, and he's able to get a Rubik's Cube together. Whatever time, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Once he gets that feeling of completion, then he learns newer things. Oh, I can write a piece of code and it does something for me. So writing a code amplifies my ability, provides me leverage. And then he goes and shows his mom, hey, every day I'll show you a picture about some galaxy, some star. But what does it do? It connects him to galaxies and stars. That may be a connection that eventually that may yield some results. But he then realizes that if I can do these things, and he has this desire to start a company which he has heard, and his mind is filling in the gaps with, like I said, like for all humans. Then when he's playing Roblox, he says, oh, I can do this and other people make money of this. Why can't we do the same? And he gets 4 people together and tries it. Now he hasn't completed the project. They tried and they built, some of them built characters who have some powers, all within the context. And then he hasn't yet got to the stage where he'll put it onto the Roblox library, and if people use it, he'll make some money, which is basically Roblox credits. Not that I don't think he'll make real money. But that in itself, the emergence of that spirit is what you want. Now, many people may automatically have that spirit. If they have it, they should be people who will be doing entrepreneurship. If they are approaching entrepreneurship like we approached in our time, finding a job, then they should never touch it with a barge pole. Because a career is the biggest dead-end thing there is. A career, they are telling you that in a career, you will go from place to place, step to step every 2 years. You're essentially retracing your class 1 or kindergarten to class 12 journey, now in an adult framework.
It's like that, the advertisement that used to come out for government jobs.
Yes.
Pay scale 60, 80, something, dash, and then dash. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So if that appeals to me, I should not look at entrepreneurship.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Then what you have to get out of it, because there is no linear progression in entrepreneurship, which is there in your class 1 to class 12. You will think every year I get a promotion. Every year I want a hike and I want a promotion. The mind is now mapped into this schooling mechanism. And this schooling mechanism was introduced during the colonial era. Whereas in your Veda Pathshala era, the Veda Pathshala that I know, and I know that all Veda Pathshalas are somehow resemble each other, there is a small kid who is 6 years old. He is leading with a rope, a bull, which is about 6 foot tall, 5 foot tall, in Kalanjeri, in Tanjavur. This is a Veda Pathshala that I visited many times. There is a kid from all ages, from 6 to the age of 19. They all stay together. They take care of the farm. They take care of the cattle. They learn the Vedas. And then they also learn the conventional education and they get a degree. I think they have made an arrangement where at the end of the education, but when they pass out, they are complete farmers. They are complete cooks. They can cook an entire meal by themselves and they've got a degree. And it's up to them whether they want to pursue the degree line and, give some bank exam or whatever is the conventional mode of finding employment, or go down the Veda Pathshala path and become a priest or become whatever are the different aspects open to it. So these guys have just opened the thing out to a much broader spectrum. And if you put this kid on a farm, he will run the farm. Absolutely, the confidence level is astonishing. It doesn't fear cows, doesn't fear bulls. I would be scared to get into that thing. That cow will, butt me with her horns, or the bull would be, snorting and very scary. This kid will be eating the bull. I've seen that. I mean, it's really amazing. The education system that we had before actually equipped you to become experts in the real world. And so when these guys evolved some new thinking, new way of planting a seed or new way of farming, then it comes from lived experience. The people who are looking at entrepreneurship today after going through a formal education system, I've read in a book and have talked about it, and that is their entrepreneurship. If the kids already have our work, and by work, programming is also work, granted, or they construct robots, or they run a newspaper business, or in their school, they set up a shop during some fete and made some money. You have that thing in you, right? I would like to do something which is has some commercial element in it, and then I make some money out of it. You enjoy that. Then you have the entrepreneurship thing in you. You don't read about Elon Musk and Mark Anderson and Bill Gates and all these 5 names in a book, and then you read a book about entrepreneurship, and then I'm joining the entrepreneurship course, which is exactly a copy of the class 1 to class 12 education. They are looking for a career in entrepreneurship. This is looking like for a black colored white car. There is no career in entrepreneurship. You are an entrepreneur or you are a career person. You can't have a career in entrepreneurship or an entrepreneurial career. So this is, I think, the mistake they make. So if kids have this element in them and we can implant the ability in them to do projects or to not mistake talk for action, not mistake words for action, then they will be folks who will be successful. And everything, the strength, all the other things that you say in your HappYness Helix are also success helix. They actually parallel each other, like our model of the DNA. So as you follow the happiness, success also comes with it. That's because you have calibrated what success means at that stage of happiness, and you are able to then move to the next stage. You don't look for success here with your happiness level here, or happiness here with your success level here. You match it to wherever you are, to level the two with each other. So then you have all the other things sort of come into balance.
So would you say that, I'm intentionally butting in here.
Yes.
For a person who is looking at an entrepreneurship as becoming an entrepreneur, if they're looking at it as a replacement for a career, right, then they shouldn't be.
They should not, because yeah.
Okay. So, therefore, I'm extending it further. Would it mean that they should be comfortable with discomfort?
Completely. Yes. Because our education system puts them in this mode. And if you look at any company and you talk to the employees there, they will say, hey, I have not got my hike. I have not got promotion. I should have got promotion. What are they doing? They are paralleling their kindergarten to class 12 journey inside the company.
Interesting.
They're doing the same thing.
Interesting. I didn't make this connection.
That is progress in their minds. Every year, at the end of the year, I give my final exam, which is your appraisal discussion. And now I want a promotion. And they may not see it that way, but that is what is happening.
So this is happening subconsciously.
Subconsciously.
That I'm used to something changing what I think is better.
Correct.
Improvement in my mind. So class 1 to 2 to so on till class 12. And then 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is. So I expect that to continue perennially.
In that structure. In that structure. Or a corporate structure now.
Right? So I need to actually take pause. If I am going to be an entrepreneur, I need to take pause and look at what is the model that I have in my mind. Because this is subconscious, it is not so very obvious. So I need to actually take pause and ask myself those uncomfortable difficult questions. What is my map of the world? What is my view of the world? What is my understanding of what progress is? And then become comfortable with discomfort in the sense that it is the journey, it is the learning, constant learning that I'm getting through the process of whatever it is that I'm doing. And if I'm constantly learning and not just, I'll take a small segue here. I ask people what's the difference between a habit and a ritual. And most people tell me exactly the opposite of what it is. They say a ritual is mindless. I said, no, a habit is mindless. A ritual is something that is done very mindfully. If you are doing something mindfully, knowing why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and what you need to do, and when you need to do, then it is a ritual. You're 100% present and you're doing it with awareness. Then it's a ritual. However, if I'm doing it mindlessly, then it is a habit.
Correct.
So I think we need to understand, people who are embarking on this entrepreneurship thing, they'll need to actually ask themselves this question. Am I taking one and trying to fit that into my other life, so to say? And if that is so, no.
Correct.
Right? So be comfortable being uncomfortable. Constantly look for a learning.
Correct.
Constantly look and ask the question, why this way and why not another way? And also the opposite of that, why should it be like this? Why cannot it be better?
Question status quo.
Question status quo. I think there's a wonderful book, I'm sure you've read it, Creator's Code, Amy Wilkinson.
I've heard about it. I haven't read it.
Amazing book.
Yeah.
Absolutely lovely. In terms of how you can become an entrepreneur, so to say. So anybody who tells me that they want to become an entrepreneur, I say, please read this book first, then come and talk to me.
Correct.
Right. So I think this is for people that are thinking about entrepreneurship or have started the entrepreneurship process. If they have started the entrepreneurship process, would it still make sense for them to go back and take a look at what their structure in their head is?
Yes, absolutely. Because otherwise it will lead to very difficult situations later on. So small divergences at the beginning leads to huge divergences as time passes.
Like in golf.
Yeah.
Half a degree here, I'm in the next fairway.
Correct. Or in the ditch. Whatever it is. People should be very clear that progress is measured differently, and here is where we should probably maybe talk about the Indic thing. In a way, the Pathshala, it is not, he's in class 1, he's class 2, he's class 3. All the people live together. The boys all live together. And by the way, girls also used to have Veda Pathshala. Today, they may or may not be, unless they have facilities. So, each kid may have a kid. This small 6-year-old kid can manage the bull, and the elder kid cannot manage that bull. So this kid has got capacities. So you develop, your progress is measured in terms of what capacities have you developed rather than how much time have you passed. Entrepreneurship is about what capacities has your group, your organization, you personally have developed. Then you have crossed a milestone. Not how much time you spend being an entrepreneur, which is what is measured in either in your classrooms or in corporate career. Oh, I spent 2 years at grade 6, now I should be grade 7. This is bullshit because it doesn't work entrepreneurship. Oh, I made a breakthrough in 1 month. We went from drawing a design of a rocket ship to launching it. Is you have reached capability.
Correct.
Now I can use that capability to market some services to people who may want to put a satellite up, who may want to put remote sounding up. So entrepreneurship is developed in that, is measured in progress of development of capacities and capabilities. Career is measured in terms of position and years spent, either treading water or passing time or twiddling your thumbs. I've spent this. If you look at the Indic education system, at least the little that I know of it, and if I look at the Western education system, the lot that I know of it and I internalized, this is the difference. The Indic education system leaves the people who pass through it with capacities and capabilities. or that was how it was designed. And people who adhere to it, kids still emerge that way. You throw a kid from that Kalanjeri way, the Pathshala, into a field, and they will turn it into gold in no time. Just a middle 14, 15-year-old to 19-year-old. They know how to make a farm out of it, how to plant things in it, how to get cattle, and they can go and give a bank entrance exam and probably clear the banks.
I'm going to ask you to hold on to that. So I'm going to come back to this.
Sure.
So a thought that sparked when you were speaking about all of this is not something that is prepared. So if I'm going to be on an entrepreneurship journey, one of the things that we hear today is that make sure that you have co-founders. Make sure that you have people that can share. My input to people is that find people where you have a 180-degree view. The maximum intersection with that other person should only be 90 degrees.
Correct.
So in some places they will be 180 degrees apart because it just doesn't overlap. And I say that if you can ideally get 3, 5, okay, but 3, 4, you're doing good.
3 is good.
3 is good. 5, it requires greater synergy when you have 5 people.
Correct.
At a value level, which I think we'll come back to the systems that we are talking about. I'll come back to that. So what would your thoughts be in terms of identifying co-founders or people to share this journey with?
So many people think that it is good to go with people whom you know for a long time, which is, for some time is good. And first, I think there should be odd number of people always. Second, there should be people who are okay with being wrong or being outvoted. Because sometimes when you have odd number of people, you can outvote. You'll always have a 2-1 or a 3-2 decision when you have co-founders and you're voting on or figuring out how to go forward. And when you are outvoted, you don't take it personal. I mean, okay, so I felt this way, you guys felt this way. Okay, we'll go down. Now that, which in Amazon Jeff Bezos calls disagree, but
disagree and commit.
So you have to commit as a team. So be prepared to be a team player and be prepared to learn from each other. So there is a respect among each other that I can learn from you things that I don't know. You can learn from me things that you don't know. X can learn from Y. And so there is a desire to learn different areas or different things and trust in each other's ability that you will do what's right. That is all that is required. Basic trust and the desire to learn from each other and respect for each other. And an odd number of people. I always say odd number of people because the moment you have even number of people and you get to a 2-2 stage, you open the door for politics to come in immediately. Because somebody will come and say, oh no, you are right. You saw the richest person in India had 2 sons. And then the mother had to come in and sort things out.
So odd number of people, trust in each other.
And respect for each other.
Respect for each other.
And coming from the fact that we can learn from each other.
And ability and willingness to learn from each other.
Yes. Okay. It's very important.
Lovely. What thoughts, inputs would you have for people who are already have been on their entrepreneurship journey? They haven't done any of this that we have spoken about until now. Right? And they are treading water. They are not moving. They are not dead, but they are not alive as well. What would you suggest to them? What would you give them as an idea or a thought, however difficult? Sometimes I say that we are here not to win a popularity contest, but to be effective. In the spirit of being effective, what would your suggestions be?
So I would think the founders need to get together. You're talking about the team, right? Not the individual? Or
don't know.
Either.
Could be.
So if let's say if there's a team that is wondering, hey, what are we doing? There's a company and it's either going up or down. Then I would suggest the team get together and figure out what is it that they want and what is it that they are attached to. If they are attached to the fact that I've spent so many years and I need something for it, then they shouldn't have been entrepreneurs in the first place, because entrepreneur is a high risk game. You might spend 3 years and have nothing to show for it. That's what it apparently looks like. But you at least know 10 things that you should not do. And then in your next round, if you wanted to be entrepreneur, if you just want to get out and retire, or you thought, hey, this was going to be a unicorn, but now I don't know where to take it, then whichever field you are in, I would say review, find somebody, sell it to the person and get out of it.
All right. Or even, worst case, just shut it down.
Shut it down. Yeah. If you think it's going nowhere. Or vacate and allow new leadership to emerge. Allow somebody else to come in and who knows how to take the company forward. Or a new team to take the company forward. Those are all possibilities. But it's very hard. And why do I say it's very hard? Again, from my teachers, apparently it's told as a true story. But I don't know if that's true. Many years ago near Delhi, in India, there is this thing about alchemy, right? You can transform material into gold.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people say it's allegorical, some people say it's real. Allegorical as in the individual transforming into what in Sufi terminology is called insani kamil, the complete man, or the realized soul. Or in the real world, it's like taking a glass or some item and converting it into gold. So there was a person who could do that, and there was a seeker who was trying to figure out how to find a person who knew how to convert a material into gold. So he found somebody who took him to this person who lived in a mountain. Let's say, for argument's sake, he lived in the Aravali Hills, close by to Delhi. Went into he used to live in the caves, and met him. And behind him, there was a heap of gold nuggets. And there were metals which he would convert into gold. So he asked him, he said, yeah, I can show you how it is done, and I can teach you, and it will take so much time, and if you're interested in learning. He said, that's fantastic. And can you give me one nugget, because you make so many nuggets? And he said, you see, that is a problem. Once you learn this art, you cannot let go of that nugget. It's the same problem with people who think they are in a startup. They can't let go of it because they think they have a goal. So when you ask them to take a tough call, which is shut down, either lead, follow, or get out of the way, or sell it and go and figure out something else to do, they are unable to do it. And so if you are treading water, then you are actually going down.
Yeah.
Because inflation is there, competitors are catching up, the value of your company is going down, so you must know when to exit and how to exit. And if you don't know, you engage somebody. And maybe instead of getting $10 million, you get 10 lakh rupees, 1 million rupees instead of $1 million. You should be happy with it. If your requirement, if you are too attached to unicorn status, huge amounts of money, then the entrepreneurship journey is not for you, because you are actually attached to money. Then maybe you should just stick with the career. The valuation game, or making pots of money at the end of it, should be a byproduct of what you have done, not the goal. Now, once you have created a product or a service that has value, and then people are coming to you, and you are enjoying yourself delivering value to customers, and then as it grows, at some point you may start thinking about valuation. But if that was your goal right from the start, you would have been in the career in the first place, because you wanted to do class 10, class 12, BTech, MTech, PhD, and you want to do double PhD, and this is your linear growth that you wanted. Entrepreneurship is not linear. It's a non-linear space. You go with a linear model in your mind, you're bound to get messed up.
So another question, again, is this why we have so many, within quotes, dropouts that are extremely successful as entrepreneurs?
Exactly. Because they did not believe. They were all autodidacts. They taught themselves. So most of the guys, even though they give galis to Bill Gates, and maybe rightfully so, because now with so much of power, he is doing all sorts of random stuff. Many of these guys taught themselves, and when you teach yourself, you can go into depths that no boundary in a formal education structure can hold. Because in order to do that level of learning in a particular field, you don't. So what would Bill Gates do learning about geography and the name of some river in Malaysia and Biscay history and what happened is irrelevant to him. He learned how to program in MS-DOS right off the bat. And using that programming knowledge, he learned more. He used to program till he was 45. In fact, when he used to attend meetings and take programs, so he enjoyed it. And you must enjoy that process, whatever it is, whether it's service or product, software or design, architecture, take your pick. You enjoy that process, then you create things, people like it. Once you reach that, the fact that you have a product or a service that is finding, in corporate terms, it's called finding traction. People are coming to you and like it, and you enjoy living that. The fact that your revenues are growing, you are able to be profitable, you break even, all those milestones you reach, then valuations and making money becomes a byproduct.
So I'm conscious that, again, taking that feedback that we got from people, make it into bite-sized or at least scoop-sized.
Golgappa-sized.
Golgappa-sized, yeah. I think what I got from this segment that we spoke about was in terms of entrepreneurship. Be comfortable with discomfort, be a lifelong learner, be willing to be proven wrong. Do not be attached to something that you think you're creating, which I think we'll talk a little more about in the next segment, where we're going to talk about Indic and your understanding. And last but most important, the importance of a family and the support structure that is absolutely important and relevant in making the person successful, right? Like you said, the fact that Siddha was here and she was able to take care of her career and manage the family, manage 2 young children. And yes, you did make AT&T a lot richer, but I don't think you did enough.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think they went out, they were no longer the important. I don't think you did enough, Jaya. You should have spoken not for 40 minutes a day, you should have spoken for 2 hours a day. But, coming back, I think, the importance of that support structure, right? And I'm finding this in the work that I do also, that wherever there is a support structure, the people are able to perform much, much better. And something that you said that stuck with me was don't confuse words for action.
Yeah.
Or something else that you also told me once. Don't confuse activity for accomplishment.
Correct.
Right? Long time ago.
Correct.
I don't know whether you remember when you told me that, but we were talking about something that we were trying to do.
Yeah.
And you said, let's not confuse activity for accomplishment. So with that, we're going to be taking a short break and we'll be back because we are very hungry. We've been shooting for a while. We're going to have some lunch. And our host has promised us some very interesting local cuisine, local as in Karnataka. So I'm looking forward to that. And when we come back, what we're going to be talking about is this very important thing that Jaya holds very dear to his heart, which is about Indic culture, the overarching importance of having that kind of a grounding in terms of everything that we do, that we do not have to mindlessly ape what works in other cultures, in our culture. I think that's the summary of what I've learned in my interactions with Jaya on this subject. When we come back, we'll be talking a little about that and how we can blend it into our daily lives, and coming back to the theme of the podcast, how we can be both successful, fulfilled, and happy. And therefore, because of all of this, we'll be healthy as well. So we'll be back again.